So the looser my beginnings are, the easier it is to imagine different possibilities. I'm celebrating World Watercolor Month with a new video every day in July. Anywhere your darks need to be, we need to figure out how to paint those. This is actually an idea I got from Instagram. Paul Wang is his name. He had just posted a demo and I thought I wanted to share it with you because it was so insightful, and I can't even draw a rectangle right now, so there's that. Let's just draw several. And what Paul was doing in his Instagram, and you can visit Instagram and see it, and I'm going to share it as well from a watercolor perspective, and hopefully from my own perspective, is that when, boy, those are terrible rectangles. You can tell I'm a true artist because nothing's straight. Our first option when we have a big dark shape that maybe is our darkest dark, and maybe it's large, would be to fill it in nice and solid and very black. And that's going to be very dramatic. You know, it's going to have tons of impact, but it's also a little bit like a black hole. So what are our other options? And so we have lots of other options, and we're going to look at a few of them. First of all, if you had simply, with watercolor, we get nuance. So if you just had black, if you just had a solid color, you know, we wouldn't have to just fill in that black square. You could fill it in with maybe line and cross hatching and create some texture that way. You could fill it in with a little texture with some scribble marks and create some texture that way, so that your black shape was, you know, had a little more something, you know, to be interesting. This is the blackest of all the shapes still, so there is that. But with watercolor, we also have the ability, and I'm going to use, I think, neutral tint first of all, if I can find it. I think it's this one. Okay, so we're going to, with a shape and with watercolor, we have a little more than just solid black. So this is the neutral tint. I'm going to add a little water. We're just going to fill this square. So even at this, with this, we have the ability to adjust our values so that there's a little bit of nuance within this black shape and a single color. And we could also wet the area and fill it with shape that way, or with color, sorry, value, darken our values, let things flow a little bit more. And our big dark shape gets interesting because of value transitions. We can also make our big dark shape interesting with color transitions. So in this case, let's try some indanthrene blue. And I'm going to go this way because I'm left-handed. So indanthrene blue at its darkest is not going to be as dark as black, but we can bring in another color. I think I've got quinacridone sienna here. Because blue and orange are complementary, so they're going to mix to make a muddy neutral. And suddenly our darkest shape is interesting because of that. Now with blue, and I'm not sure if the indanthrene will do it, and I also have a bit of a bloom happening, so we've got texture happening there as well. That's really pretty. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just scooch over a little bit. Okay, this is Moonglow. And Moonglow is already a premixed color. It's got blue, it's got red, I think Quin Rose, and I think it's got a yellow in it too. So it's a lovely murky color, but it's also a color that kind of separates as it dries. And so just sitting there by itself, it can make a beautiful, interesting dark. And I really try to notice in my palette, when I'm mixing color, if a color separates as it's drying, and you end up with this beautiful complex puddle, and we kind of have that actually in my blue puddle here. There's this has dried from a previous painting session, And so we have both violet and blue dried in my palette here. So whatever blue and violet I mixed, they separate as they dry. And that means it's going to make beautiful textures in a wash. And so I like to pay attention to that. So one color I believe that does that, and I'm relying on memory here, is ultramarine blue. And I'm going to mix it with an orange. We're going to do the blue and orange combo again, but with the ultramarine. Let's try Aussie Red Gold. It's going to be an interesting, it's an orangey yellow, so it's going to be a greenish neutral now, because blue and yellow make green. And we'll use enough water, so hopefully it wants to separate. Let's try some pure ultramarine in the mix. But I mean, this is a beneficial exercise if you want more interesting darks, or even middle values. You know, this isn't the darkest. It's not going to be a black, but it's going to be give you an interesting dark that you can then just have something that's more interesting to look at than this black hole over here. And let's dot in another droplet of water over here. As it's drying, it's going to be more receptive to blooms, or more accommodating to blooms. And you know, each of these gives us an opportunity to do something more interesting than we could do with just neutral tint, which is actually really beautiful up here. Look at these little washes of neutral tint and how it blooms. This is a phthalo blue mixed with a green gold. And we're going to throw some red on there. To give us a nice dark as well. So we start to see this exercise of making darkest darks and making them interesting. Colors that separate as they dry. Colors that watermark easily. These make your dark masses more interesting. It makes them more textured. It gives them more depth. And you can build on that, which is really beautiful. Perhaps if you have an area like this, with my green here, maybe I go in with, that's the, what is that red? Pyrrole red from Daniel Smith. Very dark, and just, it really pops actually. And then I can touch a little bit of the phthalo turquoise right into there as well, and let them kind of pool together. And just explore ways of making my darks more interesting, so that even in those passages where not much is happening, stuff is happening. Give yourself willingness to play with this. And it doesn't have to be in just this way. This is something you can do with your landscape paintings. And I'm going to dive back into that. For me, as I was working on this, I wanted to put some darkest darks over here. They're a little out of scale, I think, with the rest of the painting, but I'm going to just zoom in again so you can see them. And here, if I can remember, I was actually working from this palette, which is my Angela Fair palette from Daniel Smith, the 18 colors I chose as what I might consider essentials. It's hard because that changes all the time. But there's a phthalo turquoise that I used here with green gold, and then I dotted in some Sodalite Genuine, and the Sodalite is what created some texture here. It's also washed over top of some Venetian red, which is this orangey color here. So we end up with some complexities, we end up with a cool to warm transition, and this beautiful dark shape. I feel like if I want this to really be darker, I would build up probably more texture there, but I already see some interesting darks happening there, and in the places where the color is a little bit lighter in value. Here it just looks like a dark near black or navy blue. But here, where the color is a little lighter, we get to see the granulation of the pigment from the sodalite. So there's always lots of beauty to see when we're willing to actually step back from being purely black and going to those slightly lighter values. Then we get to bring in some of those interesting textures. And we see that here we've got darkest darks are all in greens. I think there's some perylene green here, undersea green, and they're very rich. And the undersea green is a granulating color, which gives us texture as well. Our darkest darks here were that piemontite, but I wanted to bring back to this one again. We have some very rich blues. I think it's indigo here. And trying to remember, I was working with the perylene violet as well. And that's a lot of this color in here. And then in a fuller saturation, of course, it's in near black. The indigo is kind of a cool, darkest dark. And then the perylene was more of a warm, darkest dark. So we get just much more interesting color than if we were using pure black. And this is where watercolor artists, I have to give a plug for watercolor again, we have an advantage, because I think if you're working in acrylic, if you're working in oils, people tend to dive for the black every time when they want to get those dark colors in. They add black to their colors to make them darker. And as watercolorists, we get to work with color, and I think we get to learn about color on a deeper level through using it. So this is where those color studies really benefit you, doing a value study and giving yourself that little game of, you know, what kind of interesting darks can I make, and make that little box of grids to explore. Start with a focal point shape, and in this, let me see if I have a piece of paper I can do this with. We'll just pull this right off, and then I can give you a prompt to start with. So here in a blank piece of paper, the first thing to do if you want to be imaginative is give your imaginations a prompt, somewhere to start. And so for me, often that's that one brush stroke. The Cenarius blue really was nice for me the other day. Let's be bolder and more dramatic today. Let's go for the neutral tint and do a big dark shape. Look at that. So we start with a big shape, and how do we make this into a landscape? You give yourself that little assignment. So that's where I would encourage you to go today. We've got a few minutes. I might as well keep going a little bit. Moisten it with some water. Neutral tint is really interesting because it moves, for one thing, quite a lot, but once it's dry, it stays put. And I can't remember which artist told me that, but I thought that was a great thing to realize, that once it's dry, you're not going to see it moving anymore. I want to pull some of this dark up a little bit and bring this shape up towards the edge of the page. And then touch a little more neutral tint right in there. A little bit of splatter. And then I think I'll go with a vibrant color that I really enjoy, my cobalt teal blue. Give myself a little more scope for the imagination. For me, imagination means having freedom. If you have a very strong shape that's not open-ended, it's very hard to be imaginative about it. So the looser my beginnings are, the easier it is to imagine different possibilities. You know, I see a tree here. This could be my landscape of maybe shrubbery blocking my horizon, perhaps. This actually looks like another tree. Let's make it a tree. And this is manganese violet, by the way, another favorite color. If I'm going to be using my imagination, I might as well work with my favorite colors. And this is as well my method of gamifying what I do as an artist. I really like to remind myself to play by making painting a game fairly often. What happens if I slap my brush down on the paper? I make one expressive stroke. Am I able, do I have the ability, do I have the imagination to turn it into something? And that's what I want to do here. And I want to learn how to listen to myself. I don't want to paint so fast that I don't let my ideas happen. And I don't notice what's maybe beautiful and interesting in the painting. It's interesting right now, I had that cobalt teal on my brush and I touched it in here and you kind of see it and then it kind of gets buried by the neutral tint. And I just think that was really interesting. Is if you feel like you're not sure how to do this, if you feel like you just couldn't do this, you can slap your brush across your paper. You can. It's physically possible for you to do that. But sometimes we get what holds us back. I think fear of failing, fear of messing up, knowing that what the exercise is here, the experiment, we're going to use Scruffy here. The experiment is at giving yourself, training yourself to start to be a little more open to possibility. And maybe that means doing this with some really ugly messes for a while. That's okay. And that's where I think we struggle, is we don't want to waste paper when we don't realize that, you know, a training session is all about letting the paper be a place where you can make mistakes in that process of training yourself how to see things in a new way, how to use your imagination. This is Phthalo Yellow Green from Daniel Smith. I'm going to put some maybe grasses. I don't know why there would be grasses this high up when this is the middle of a tree, but it could be trees. Let's put some more over here. And it's giving yourself permission to be a little weird in your paintings, which I think is usually where my best paintings are made, is when I stopped worrying about what people were going to think and I just did what maybe felt good to me in the moment. And a lot of times, I have to mention this, there are paintings that feel so good when I'm painting them. Super exciting. I'm just really, really in the moment and having so much fun. And sometimes when I look at that painting after it's finished, I still feel good. I feel excited and in the moment, but I feel the same emotion that I had, the joy and excitement I brought to that painting. But I also recognize that the painting's really not, technically there's not a lot of strength there. And maybe it's not something that I would show to others, but the benefit it gave me in bringing that emotion, that joy to my heart as I painted, it just gives me strength to look at those paintings. Even if I know that I'll probably never frame them, that reminder that, you know what, I really got heart value out of that painting. I just want to encourage you with that. You know, give your painting session some heart value. And if it does your heart good, it's really, really worthwhile. And you will bring that emotion into your future paintings when you allow it to happen, in your playful painting sessions, in your painting sessions where you give yourself permission to be weird, and make mistakes. And to me, I often, to be a good guide for this is to think about a small child and the full attention they give their creative work before they get to the age where they're starting to be self-critical. And you know, they're often fully invested in the process, so focused. And often they take their painting further than it needs to go. Often when I paint with little kids, sometimes I have friends over and we paint with their kids, and because mine are teenagers now, but often they'll just keep adding paint until the whole thing is this gray mass of mud. And and they have so much fun. And, you know, they don't care what it looks like in the end, usually. It's all about just they want to do it more. They want to keep painting because it feels good. And, you know, no matter what the result is. And I want to have that same kind of focus, even though I do probably want to know when to stop and not end up with a muddy mess. But I also just want to have that kind of attention and joy in my work. And so I try to take these imaginative painting sessions and just let myself be weird a little bit in them. And I'm just going to grab the neutral tint one more time and put a little dark pop in here. That's not quite what I wanted. This video demonstration was originally created as part of the bonus content for my online watercolor course, Heart-Led Landscapes in Watercolor. If you're interested in developing an intuitive, loose approach to landscape painting in watercolor, and these are techniques that you can use for all subjects of watercolor, but you can access the Heart-Led Landscapes course along with 12 bonus sessions that have been recorded in previous iterations of the course, all on my website at learn.angelafair.com. Our goal really is to support you as you teach yourself to paint, as you're a self-learner for life in watercolor, and to keep that focus of being encouraged, doing it for the value of the process and what it does for our hearts. Sometimes we only notice the artists that are, I don't know, doing it for the ego, or the artists that seem like they have it all together and are doing everything perfectly. And we're over here muddling along and trying to figure everything out. And so that the fact that we can do this together really honestly and make art for the value it brings to our hearts, that's something that we share and encourages me every day. It's something that I get to bring this peace and presence into the rest of my life, and I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for you, like I said, because you support, we support each other in this, and it's really good to know you're not alone.